The question at the moment that I get to asking you in about 10 minutes' time or shortly after that will be a variation on the theme of whether or not the Conservative Party, as we have known it for all of our lives, is to all intents and purposes finished.
O'Brien suggests that the party's decline is not just about poor leadership or policy missteps, it's about a deeper ideological collapse. He argues that figures like Boris Johnson and Liz Truss didn't just fail politically, they exposed how hollow and unsustainable the party's promises had become.
That will be the question. I'm not going to do the show based on the presumption that it is, which we may have done in the past. I don't know that we have, but it is. I think it closes down some interesting lines of inquiry, not least what a resurrection would look like, or what a revivification. That's one of my favourite words, you may have noticed, would look like. But that's where we will be at the end of this monologue. So you don't necessarily need to listen to it in order to have a valid contribution to make, which is not always the case. Of course, I reserve the right to change the question in the course of my own pontifications and ponderings, but as things stand at the moment, I'll be asking you whether or not it is your party, if it is your party, or the one of only two major parties that you have known for most of your life, unless, of course, you're in Scotland, Wales or Northern Ireland, but even then, it's called the Conservative and Unionist Party for reasons. Is it actually over, and if so, why? All right? Possibly even who, if we were going to pin it on one person, who would that person be? Because it wouldn't be Kemi Badenoch, I don't think, would it? And listen, I may get a bit personal and mischievous and cheeky in the course of this morning, but right now I'm just speaking to you completely authentically. I don't know. I don't know whether there is an objective case for crossing live to Manchester to listen to the death throes, certainly, of a political leadership, as opposed to a political party. I don't know. I find, as you know, much of what she does truly ridiculous, but much of what she represents feels to me politically and historically, even perhaps democratically important. Okay? So, I say Conservative leader, who's the first person you think of? It's going to depend partly on your age. Who is the first person that you think of? The first Conservative leader that you think of? You're going to go for Margaret Thatcher. You're going to go for David Cameron, possibly. If you are a lifelong Labour supporter, you might go for Liz Truss. That's the way you go. I've got a 25-year-old colleague who's gone immediately for David Cameron. I think I would probably go for Margaret Thatcher, so it's going to be pretty boring, this experiment, if it depends entirely on your age. Another 25-year-old colleague said immediately Theresa May. It's just a little thought experiment. All of these people popping into your head were leaders of the Conservative Party. And then, how about a leader of the Conservative Party who didn't end up Prime Minister? Who are you going to think of then? Pretty tricky, actually. In recent years, they've all had a go. But I mean, if you're a political anorak, if you possibly did a degree or an A-level in it, you probably go for William Hague. Do you know, I nearly said Alec Douglas-Home then, but he was Prime Minister. He used to be the byword for leadership failure in the Conservative Party because he inherited the mantle of both leader and Prime Minister and then lost the subsequent election. William Hague is the leader that most people think of now, as opposed to perhaps Michael Howard. I'm just pointing out that these are not political jokes. Ian Duncan Smith, tricky. And that actually might be part of the problem, part of the question that we're asking, because Ian Duncan Smith was objectively disastrous as leader of the Conservative Party, but because of Brexit, which is no doubt going to feature in our conversation this morning, he was able to reinvent himself as some sort of statesman, despite being a byword for incompetence, idiocy, and fantasy CVs. That's part of the problem, perhaps. I don't know, because it's a ruthless machine. They got rid of him when it became clear that he was not going to get close to winning a general election. He didn't even get the chance to fight one. Michael Howard was a good leader, not least because he accepted his fate and put so much effort as leader into preparing the party for the election after the one he knew he was going to lose. You might not want to thank him for it, but he's the guy that put David Cameron, George Osborne and the rest of them in place, in pole position for the inheritance that would follow. Haven't mentioned Boris Johnson yet, and it's nearly 10:10. Boris Johnson, if we were to confine our conversation to the who's of it rather than the whys, would no doubt be writ large. And yet it's 2025. It is only 6 years since he was carried into Parliament on the shoulders of a grateful nation. Kind of. Again, the curse of Cassandra, being a political Cassandra, just sitting there going, this is going to end in tears. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. You put this guy in charge and you're going to rue the day. Not just the country, but his actual colleagues are going to rue the day. The people currently cheering him to the rafters will be the ones that lose the most from promoting such an obviously inadequate and unsuitable character. And we, as a country, have learnt nothing from it, because the man currently leading the opinion polls in this country is, yeah, I'm going to say it, an even more inadequate and unsuitable character for Prime Minister. And we will sit here again saying that you're going to rue the day, you're going to regret this, like we did with Liz Truss's budget. Oh, there's another one, Liz Truss. Who thought of Liz Truss? I mentioned her, didn't I, in the context of Labour supporters. Sat here saying you're going to rue the day, you can't put her in, you can't let the Tufton Street think tanks rewrite our economic rules because the whole thing will blow up. They are nowhere near as clever as they think they are. In fact, they're very, very stupid. They just have the trappings of the British class system, convincing them that their sense of entitlement is actually a qualification. So who'd go for Truss? I don't know. Well, other names. Are there any other names? Ted Heath, if you're of a certain age, perhaps. Ted Heath, again, an impressive politician, never more so, of course, than when he stamped on the rhetorical windpipe of his cabinet colleague Enoch Powell, despite the fact that at the time, as Satnam Sanghera makes a superb case in the Times today, as he writes about his former school mate, and I mean by that simply someone that went to school with Robert Jenrick. I have no idea whether they were mates, and it would be close to libel to suggest that somebody who wasn't was. But they went to the same school in Wolverhampton, so their lessons in race relations and integration would have been very similar, and yet Satnam has ended up one of the best writers in Britain, and Robert Jenrick has ended up one of the worst ventriloquists in history. I don't know if you saw his routine with the wig yesterday at Conservative Party conference, but I say what you like about it, you could see his lips moving. Of that there is no doubt. So, John Major, again, Ted Heath, I should have finished that sentence, did fly in the face of public opinion when he cut Enoch Powell off at the knees. As we are discovering in recent days, weeks, months, years, racism is a very intoxicating drug. It's a very tempting offer for an awful lot of people who don't like thinking or indeed taking responsibility for their own actions or political decisions. A very, very, very intoxicating drug indeed. Ted Heath had the courage to stamp on that. Current breed of Conservative leadership, despite being much more ethnically diverse than any cabinet Ted Heath ever sat in, are stoking up the racism, ramping up the rhetoric. John Major. Interesting character. Decent man, clearly. One of those politicians who seems to grow in stature the further away from power he gets. For some people, Gordon Brown fits into that category, but that means you weren't paying attention at the time because he was a superb politician, just not a very good television performer. And that's pretty much it. Unless, of course, you are older than me, in which case you'd be reaching for Harold Macmillan. And, of course, everybody would reach for Winston Churchill, although it's a historical fact that he flipped parties quite a lot, but I don't know how many people who rightly revere Winston Churchill as our wartime leader think of him immediately as a Conservative Party politician or as a Conservative leader. He also lost spectacularly shortly immediately after the Second World War. So, I mean, it's all there, isn't it? 30 minutes after 10 is the time. And then we turn to today, and we turn to I don't know, maybe I should feel a little bit more schadenfreude about it, or a little bit more happiness, given that one of the main reasons why the Conservative Party is in such dire straits is because they were in denial about all of the things we've been talking about ad infinitum on this programme, all the things that Conservative supporters, particularly in my profession, but they've of course gone a little bit silent, or they insist that you go silent about all the things that they encouraged you to vote for, like Boris Johnson and Brexit. We should feel a little bit of schadenfreude. But the problem with being genuinely patriotic is that you worry about the state of the country, not just the bits of it that you support or most enjoy. And the demise of the Conservative Party as we know it is very, very bad for politics. But it's all their fault. It's certainly not your fault, and it's certainly not my fault. It's all their fault. Where do those faults lie? And I missed out Rishi Sunak, not deliberately, but just, I think, because historically he will be seen very much as a holding pattern or a postponement of where we are now. Tell me whether, and not why in the first instance, I think that would be inappropriate, whether you think, and of course, as always with these phone-ins, your opinion is more interesting if you are or were a Conservative. And actually, that's not true today, is it? No, your opinion is more interesting. The more attention you've been paying, the more interesting your opinion usually is. But on occasions like this, especially if you're describing yourself, if you're saying to me, I can't never vote for the Tories again because of ... Partygate, for example, that's actually really interesting. And you might not even be able to name 2 members of the current cabinet, but that is the position that you... So whatever has flipped you is interesting to me. So what is your answer to the question of whether or not the Conservative Party, as we have known it for all of our lives, is over?